It's day 3 in the econ streets. We're talking supply and demand. What is the objective, the learning goal for today? By the end of the lesson, you should be able to predict the effect of supply and demand on price. So you should be able to make a prediction about the price of a good based on its supply, or make a prediction about a real life good based on the demand for that product. So where does price come from? In a free market, a capitalist society free of government control, the government does not determine price. You may think you determine price by deciding how much you pay for something. You may believe that the seller who controls the good determines how much they're willing to sell it for. It's a little bit of both. The consumer and the seller work together to negotiate a price, and that price is based on the supply and the demand. The supply is the amount of the good. As you see, a bunch of boxes of stuff, a bunch of tomatoes, or a low supply, not very many tomatoes. That will affect price. The supply, the amount of a good. And then there's the demand. Everybody's demanding brand new sneakers. High demand, something that everyone wants, something sought after, is valuable. And then a low demand, no one wants it. Got to get rid of it. Got to drop the price. And that's pretty much the basics of it. We'll go into some detail and explain it a little bit more thoroughly. Let's talk pizza, because we're always talking pizza here. So you can see tons of pizza places in this world. Imagine a town with many, many pizza options. You can see plenty below. What's your favorite? I'm a Domino's guy now all of a sudden, believe it or not. But I'll eat any of those. Anyway, pizza places compete. There's a high supply of pizza places. Households, or you, the consumer, the individual, have many of options. You have many choices. They're all competing against each other. Jets versus Domino's versus Chuck E. Cheese's, Little Caesars. They're all competing. Pizza Hut. They want you to buy their pizza. You have many options. So when there's a high supply and you have many options, they have to do something to encourage or entice you to buy their pizza. So they lower their price. When supply is high, price goes down, because you are watching the pizza places battle each other. They can battle based on quality. They can try to make a better pizza than their competitor, or they can just simply lower their price. Supply goes up, price goes down with any good. Competition amongst the suppliers lowers the price. The high supply of a good makes it less rare, easier to access, lowers the price. Supply goes up, price goes down. Let's stick with that pizza theme and imagine you're selling those tomatoes to those pizza places that are competing. They need tomatoes to make the pizza sauce. This bad year, you don't have very many tomatoes. The supply is low. All of those pizza places are not just competing to sell pizzas, they're also competing to buy the raw goods to make the pizzas. Pizza Hut, Domino's, Little Caesars, they're competing with each other to see who gets your tomatoes. They're very scarce. They're very rare. They're very valuable now. They're sought after. And if people want them, they're going to have to fight over them. Now, the pizza places are not going to fight to the death over tomatoes, but they will fight with their hard-earned cash. They will bid against each other like an auction to see who can get the tomatoes. Domino's names their price. Little Caesar says, we need those tomatoes more. We're going to pay more. And then Papa John's or Pizza Hut jump in and say, actually, we'll pay even more than that. And the price goes up. You identify and understand the low supply. And you, the farmer, know in this situation you can get away with raising the price because there is a low supply. So when supply goes down, price goes up. So there is an inverse. Supply up, price down, supply down, price up. Again, we're talking about the amount of a good. When supply is low, it's rare, it's scarce, it's sought after, and that makes it more expensive. Let's talk about the demand side of the equation and how demand affects price. Sticking with our pizza theme and talking about demand, how much of something is wanted, how desirable it is. You make the best pizza in town. People love your pizza. The demand is high. People love it. They crave it. They want it. They wake up in the morning thinking about it. They eat it for lunch. They eat it for dinner. They'll even eat it for breakfast. They'll eat it cold for breakfast, the white hot for breakfast. That's how much the demand is. And if people really, really want your pizza, you can get away with charging more. You're a business. You're not a charity. You're not trying to cut deals. You're trying to feed your family while feeding the country. And so you raise your prices so that you can make more money. And if you make more money, you can hire more workers and make even more pizza and make even more money. So you identify the demand. You realize that people like your pizza better than other places. And so you can charge more. And you see this with better local pizza compared to maybe the chains like Little Caesars or Domino's, even though Domino's is number one in my heart now. It's price factor, definitely. But because your pizza's a little bit better, or your pizza place is cool to hang out at, you can charge $14 for a pizza as opposed to the $5 pizza at Little Caesars. You're not hanging out at Little Caesars or the $7.99 special at Domino's. You're not hanging out at the Domino's inside Walmart. But maybe the local pizza joint is a really cool place. It's got arcade games and TVs and everybody hangs out. And the pizza's really good. And they've got all kinds of special things they do with the pizza. And because of that, people like yours more. The demand is higher. You can charge more. Pretty simple. Now this follows the same pattern. When demand is high and people want it a lot, the price goes up. So where supply has an inverse relationship, one goes up, one goes down, demand and price are constant in that if demand is high, price goes high. And let's flip it. Let's talk about a pizza that's not necessarily demanded. Little Caesars pizza. Very few people wake up in the morning saying, gotta get some Little Caesars. Most people that end up Little Caesars, it's usually after a bad day, and it's like, I'm just gonna pick up a $5 pizza and go home. It's been one of those days. The demand is pretty low for Little Caesars pizza. And old Caesar knows that. He's very aware that people don't necessarily crave his pizza. And so in order for this little Roman to sell his pizzas to you, he has to lower his prices. Now, hate's probably a harsh word, but hey, why not? People hate Little Caesars pizza. The demand is low. And in order for them to get people to buy the pizza, that's why they offer a deal. That's their trick. They do not try to use quality to increase demand, to increase price. They just leave their quality the way it is. And in order to make money and profit, they just lower the price to the lowest they can get away with and make a profit. They try to meet the customer's demand. And they lower the price until customers are willing to make that pay. $10 for Little Caesars, no thank you. $9, no thank you. $7, $6, maybe $6. And the customer buys, and there it is. Demand down, price down. Let's look at a couple more examples. We'll shift gears and go to burgers. Five Guys. Pretty popular burger joint here in the Midwest. Pretty high demand. People like it. They crave it a bit. And since the demand is high, the price is high. Now, you may not agree with Five Guys fries or their burgers, but at least in comparison to White Castle, you would argue that demand is definitely higher for Five Guys than it is White Castle. No one wakes up in the morning craving White Castle. Similar to Little Caesars, no one makes it a point of their day to go to White Castle unless you're Harold and Kumar. You just end up at White Castle, mainly because you don't get any money in your pocket and you need some sustenance, some nutrients. So when demand is low, price is low. And we can see that in these two comparisons. Five Guys is much more expensive than White Castle. You get 20 burgers at White Castle for $10. You're carrying your food not in a bag, but in a suitcase. It's ridiculous. But the reason why the prices are so low and their teeny little sliders are so affordable is because no one really wants them, because they're not that appealing. And you can just simply see in these pictures which one looks a little bit more appealing. Although, there's a fancy White Castle photo. More examples of supply and demand to help you make predictions about price from real life. I don't know if you remember Silly Bands. They were a thing about 14 years ago. High supply of them. They were everywhere. You get 1,000 of them for just $1. Now, in comparison to a low supply product, like not Silly Bands, but gold bracelets. Not a lot of those going around. And guess what? The price is kind of high. So high supply, low supply, high supply, low price, low supply, high price. Flip flops, $5 at Dollar General. Pair of Jordans, gonna run you a couple hundred. There's not quite the same amount of supply. They're not just hanging in the store. They're not just sitting on the shelves piled up. 2021 Kia. The high supply of those are pretty cheap now, thanks to a glitch where people can use a USB and steal them. So now all of a sudden, people will decide, like, I don't really want a car that you can steal with a USB. So we get a high supply of Kias, and you can probably buy them for a pretty low price. Versus a Bugatti, not very many Bugatti cars out there in the world. It's going to cost you a couple mil. 32-inch HD TV, those things are everywhere. You probably have 10 in your house. Versus the wide video game monitor that stretches across your desk, so you can play your first-person shooters or your Fortnite and see everything possible. You're almost immersed in virtual reality. Things are going to cost you, especially if it's got a high frame rate. Let's talk about demand, high and low. Apple products. People often argue, are you an Apple or a Droid guy? And the Droid people, Samsung, are always saying, actually, the quality of the Samsung's better. And they'll argue to their death about it. But it doesn't matter, because Apple is Apple. And there is an unreal demand for Apple. People just love this product. And because people are so in love with the new iPhone, whether it's actually the best phone out there, the demand for it's so high that the price is always high. Versus, well, let's not even say Samsung. Let's say a Kobe tablet from Walmart. No one really wants the cheap $50 tablet from Walmart. That's why it's $50. Maybe even cheaper now. It's clunky. It's not very good. They'd rather have Apple. But they will buy the cheap knockoff tablet for $50 because it's just so cheap. Or they just need a device to stick in front of their kid's face that plays CoComelon and YouTube Kids. Used pickup trucks are now in high demand. There once was a time where it wasn't that case, but now I watch students constantly flipping through the Facebook marketplace looking for those used pickups, and you can never afford them anymore because everybody's looking for used pickups, and that has sent the price upward. Versus a used sedan, you probably jump on the old marketplace, find yourself a sedan for a pretty favorable price because no one is really like, hey, let's go get ourselves a used sedan. 4 doors, cruise control. Yeah, it's all right. It's a convenient car, but it's not as demanded as a pickup truck. And so the price is a lot lower. And then let's get nuts. Talk about nuts. Close out pistachios. Pretty popular. You got to pay more. Walnuts. Not a popular nut option. Not the number one draft pick in the nut community. And so with a low demand, the price falls. And if you're going to go nuts and go buy nuts at the nut store, then on the nuts shelf, walnuts are cheaper than pistachios because no one wants them. So to wrap up, supply up, price down. Supply down, price up. And then when we look at demand, demand up, demand down, price down. Those two things meet. Supply and demand combine to determine price. You as a customer understand supply and demand intrinsically in the back of your mind. The seller also knows supply and demand in the back of his mind. And you negotiate terms of pricing when you decide whether you want to buy at their price or not, based on those laws, the law of supply and demand. We think that one day the business just wrote $7. And sure, they wrote $5 on the board for a Little Caesars pizza and put it on the menu. How they got there is by trial and error, a negotiation between you and them. They tried to sell at 10, no one bought. And when they find a price where people will buy, that then becomes the price. And that can fluctuate based on how supply of the product changes over a year. That can fluctuate and go up and down based on the demand of the product for a year. So there it is. Hopefully now you can go out in the real world and be able to make some predictions about what the prices of goods should be and what they will be in the future, knowing the supply of that product, or also by knowing the demand for the product. Day 3 in the books.